Alright, guys. Let's rock and roll. We're going to go ahead and start the History of Gaming event. Welcome back to the History of Gaming Metal Gear. This episode will be the beginning of Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. So far in the series, we have completed Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, both for the MSX2. We've done a graphical and technical review of Metal Gear Solid 1 on the PlayStation. We have also completed Metal Gear Solid 1 The Twin Snakes, which is a GameCube remake of Metal Gear Solid 1, and then we just finished Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty. Leading us into Metal Gear Solid 3, of course this version will be played on the PlayStation 3 through the HD Collection, meaning that this will be a subsistence version of the game, meaning that it will have improved camera controls. Of course, every time when we speak about Metal Gear and we talk about its design, we have to talk about Hideo Kojima. During this point in time, Hideo Kojima had already released many games in the Metal Gear series and completed other works that made him quite popular amongst gamers. 2004 is a very good year for Hideo. Not only did he release the very well-received Metal Gear Solid 3 this year, he also worked on Boktai 2 for the Game Boy Advance, as well as Metal Gear Acid for the PlayStation Portable. We will be playing Metal Gear Acid. With Metal Gear Solid 3, we can see Kojima showcase his love for movies yet again, and probably the strongest showcase of his love for movies in this game, as it does have heavy James Bond tones and themes present throughout the work. This leads us to the development of the game of Metal Gear Solid 3. Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater is the third in the Solid series and fifth overall. It is the first game to disrupt the timeline so far, and in fact, this game is the very first in the chronological events of Metal Gear. Go ahead and switch to that scene now and show you the game's art as well as the system it was played on. The events of this title take place in 1964 and set the foundation for everything to follow in the Metal Gear series. It is with this development that that it is revealed that Kojima has been working with a series of themes. We did not know this about Metal Gear Solid 1 and 2 until he spoke on the development of Metal Gear Solid 3, but there are these themes throughout the first three games, and there's even a rhyming scheme to it that Kojima made up. So, to let you know what those are, we have Metal Gear Solid with Metal Gear Solid, Metal Gear Solid 2, and 3 with the following themes respectively, and they are gene, meme, and scene. So to explain this, Metal Gear Solid 1's story focused on gene manipulation of both the Twin Snakes as well as the Genome Soldiers, not to mention all of the talk about Foxdie and its focus on gene research and manipulation itself. We then have Metal Gear Solid's 2 theme of memes. No, I'm not talking SpongeBob memes, the actual definition of memes, which is a reoccurring subject, theme, or idea that is relevant to a culture or its people. Kilroy was here, the World War graffiti, and Frodo Lives, a graffiti and massive meme from the 1960s amongst hippies, which brought around the massive revival of Lord of the Rings, are both examples of cultural memes. They have no real reason for being created, they just were, and they just are what they are. But they're understood across many people with very little explanation. A lot of the internet memes we see today do follow this pattern, and that's why they're named thusly. So, how does this relate to Metal Gear Solid 2? When the Patriot AI at the end of Metal Gear Solid 2 is discussing things with Raiden late in the game, it implies that the result of its formation is of various memes created by the American culture, granting itself sentience. That is what it means when it mentions that the primordial soup of humanity was in Washington, because it's referring to its own primordial soup. So with that being said, we're now facing the theme of scene. with Metal Gear Solid 3. The theme of scene is more than just the physical scenery within the game. It means how events hold relativity to a culture as a whole. Concepts like right and wrong or friends and enemies are not absolute or eternal. Rather, they are personal and able to be transmitted and shaped by our cultures and the era or period of time that we live in. Keep your eye out for examples of this theme throughout the game, as every major character is affected by scene in one way or another. The initial development plans for Metal Gear Solid 3 were planned for the PlayStation 3, but due to the system being pushed back during its own development, the title was developed for PlayStation 2. Notable features for this game are seen as follows. Camouflage system that we've never seen before, the CQC system, stamina gauge, and then an injury and treatment system that is new to the series. Out the gate, Kojima wanted to drastically change the setting from previous games in this series. We see this in the design of the levels. Less indoor levels and a lot more outdoor levels. Even from the early stages, him and the team wanted to work with jungle themes. And we see a lot of that in this game, which is a breath of fresh air from a design perspective and games in general. We don't see a lot of games that take this neat jungle approach. And Donkey Kong Country doesn't count. This outdoor content was difficult to create, according to Kojima. This is mostly due to the amount of detail needed to make it appear truly outdoor and jungle-like with the amount of details needed, as well as the ground needing to be uneven and more natural. Just take a minute to think about PS2 games. For the most part, it's pretty even. Everything's dead flat, and you run on dead flat surfaces. So the fact that Metal Gear Solid 3 had these uneven, very natural ground layouts was pretty substantial at the time. While this is a simple concept, it's actually very hard in application. Additionally, a lot of fans were expecting a controllable interactive camera for this installment, as it's seen a lot in other games at the time, but because Kojima sees the game as part of a trilogy, at least at that time, he elected to not remove the fixed camera angle that we had seen in Metal Gear Solid 1 and 2. Although we do see the camera the fans want come back into the game with the re-release of Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence. Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater was released on November 17th of 2004 for the PlayStation 2, and Konami sold just under 4 million copies worldwide. This game earned a Metacritic score of 91%. Games of the era that we should be comparing Metal Gear Solid 3 to are as follows: Doom 3, The Chronicles of Riddick, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, Halo 2, Fable, Knights of the Old Republic 2, Half-Life 2, and I don't think legendary is even a strong enough word here, the game World of Warcraft. In 2006, we would see Metal Gear Solid 3 re-release as Subsistence, as I mentioned before. This is a re-release of Snake Eater, but it can be seen as the director's cut of the game. This re-release boasted not only the improved interactive camera, but also the Metal Gear Online add-on, a multiplayer experience, as well as the first release of Metal Gear 1 and 2 outside of Japan, the MSX versions, which of course is the version of the game we played earlier in the series. Additionally, a very well-made version of Metal Gear Solid 3 was released for the Nintendo 3DS in 2012. So if you're interested in picking up this game in any of those platforms, they're available to you. And the 3DS version is quite good. With that being completed, we now take ourselves over Metal Gear Solid 3. We made it, folks. We made it! We made it to Metal Gear Solid 3. Split across 2 missions